So to put the discussion or the talks into context right at the beginning, because we're very good as humans at going off in tangents and forgetting what we're actually talking about sometimes, or we tend to get lost. So the talks in essence are about one thing only, and that is happiness in daily living. And happiness is, in the context of these talks, something very specific. It isn't a feeling of excitement or a feeling of joy or a feeling of pleasure, different types of pleasure, but it's rather happiness through unbroken peace of mind, regardless of the circumstance we find ourselves in. So that means that we have to redefine the word happiness, because we've grown up seeking happiness in the form of pleasure, in the form of a feeling that I feel good, I feel pleased, I feel excited. That's what happiness tends to be defined as. And so, right at the beginning, I'm putting forward a concept, a statement, that the talks are about one thing, really, when you condense it all down. There's a lot of explanations, but they're all there because they support a framework that is aimed at bringing happiness in daily living into existence. And that happiness is happiness through unbroken peace of mind. And that peace of mind, what is peace of mind if it's not a feeling, if it's not a pleasure, if it's not being excited about something, or feeling good about having achieved something? Well, that peace of mind is always got to do with our attitude to circumstance, meaning how we relate to the circumstance. And it's sometimes best understood when contrasted against its opposite, the opposite of peace of mind. The opposite of peace of mind is what we can call suffering. And when we feel the suffering, when we are present with the suffering and really inquire into what is the suffering, a general description for it is an uncomfortableness with oneself, an uncomfortableness with the other. And when we look at that uncomfortableness, it isn't an uncomfortableness of circumstance. It isn't because of the pain of circumstance, but rather our attitude to the circumstance. And so both the suffering and, you could say, its opposite, which is peace of mind, are attitudinal and not circumstantial. And the peace of mind is really just the absence of suffering. So when suffering is present, we don't have peace of mind. They're mutually exclusive. They can't coexist. You can't have peace of mind, total peace of mind, and suffering at the same time. If suffering is there and there is the correct attitude towards the suffering, you can have peace with the fact that there is suffering. Now that's not total peace of mind, because the suffering is the opposite of peace. But already you can see if your attitude to the suffering is what we could call the correct attitude, and I mean correct meaning the attitude that is going to bring about or be the base of peace of mind. If there is the correct attitude to the suffering, then there is a degree of peace of mind. You're at peace with the fact that there is suffering. If the suffering dissolves completely, then you're left with peace of mind, which is not as I said, not something added into your experience, but it turns out that it is just the absence of the presence of suffering. Now, all of the talk is essentially concepts. If someone writes something down, it's a concept. So if someone writes down, what you are is God, or what you are is a failure, or what you are is awareness, or what you are is the body. Some of them are contradictory, but they're all concepts. Some might be accurate, some might be inaccurate, some might be accurate from a certain perspective. Others might be inaccurate from any perspective. So a concept is just a notion, an idea, not really a belief. We turn concepts into beliefs. But any description that I'm putting forward, any explanation is a concept. The theory of gravity, it's a concept, the concept of gravity. So the concept of gravity says that objects will fall towards the ground at a rate of 9.8 meters per second squared. It's a concept that is accurate from a certain perspective. If you drop something on the moon, it doesn't fall to the ground at 9.8 meters per second squared. And so the concept of gravity that we apply on Earth is not accurate in relation to gravity on the moon. So it's very important to understand that a concept is not absolute truth. It can never be absolute truth. It can only be a description of something from a certain perspective. And so even what I've just said is a concept of what a concept is. And most of the concepts that I put forward are there because they fit into the framework and they're very relevant to this topic of peace of mind and daily living. So, happiness for the human being turns out to be happiness through continuous unbroken peace of mind. That's a concept. It's a really useful concept because it points to something. So if we can use all of the concepts as pointers, that's what a spiritual teaching actually is. And good spiritual teachings will include in them that disclaimer, that warning. So in this teaching, it says, whatever I say, whatever I write down, whatever anyone has ever said throughout any time in history is always a concept and not the truth. And then we add in this little addition to it. The only truth in the manifestation is the impersonal sense of I am. It's something, it's part of the concept. The only truth in the manifestation is the impersonal sense of I am. So anything I say, anything anyone else has said is a concept. The only truth in the manifestation is the impersonal sense of I am. It's pointing us outside of concepts, ultimately. It's really saying at some point we move beyond concepts. And that doesn't mean at some point in a year's time. It can be any moment, even just for a little bit, because the process is a process of change through development. change through practice, not a practice that you have to set out and do, but rather through repetition. And so at any time, if we can drop into being, which is this impersonal sense of I am, and rest there. In the middle of anything you're doing, and when you're driving your car, when you're working out a really important problem, if something in your system has become equipped to understand that actually dropping into being is really the most important. It's where we find ourselves, where we know ourselves. So if you find yourself in the middle of a really complicated problem that you're trying to work out, and then the thought I am can arise, which is just a reminder. It's a reminder that yourself generates. I am. And if it happens in the middle of a very important thinking process and you stop thinking, even if it means you're going to lose temporarily everything that you had got to in your head mentally at that point, and you just drop into being. It's like, and you realize, all that thinking about trying to solve that's not really what it's about. And I'm not talking about trying to solve spiritual riddles or spiritual, conundrums. I'm not talking about the thinking of seeking. That included. At any point in time, if you feel like you're about to break through your thinking, and the thought "I am" arises, and you drop into being, that's the breakthrough. Any breakthroughs we have are really breakthroughs to deepen our capacity to be connected to ourselves. So I'm mentioning this because, as you know, I talk a lot. There's a lot of concepts in the framework, and they're very useful because they tend to act as sort of antiviruses to the existing belief systems in the body, existing belief systems that tend to prevent us from dropping into being. But we can get carried away with the concepts and forget that the peace is already here, and it just requires us to drop into a place inside of us that is quiet. We might forget that and get carried away in trying to understand the concepts too much. So if you find yourself feeling disconnected because you're thinking too much about the concepts, that's a great opportunity to just drop into being again and realize I am. That is the only truth in the manifestation. And it's pretty effortless. You can't drop into being through effort. That's one of the frustrating things when we're not sure of how this beingness, how to get there, how to do it. And we're struggling because we don't seem to have access to it. And we're really, we're genuine. We really want to understand. And yet, without even knowing it, sometimes our wanting to get it, our wanting to understand, is actually preventing us from connecting to this place in ourselves. Because the place is here already, and it just requires us to stop trying, to just stop. And stop doesn't mean, stop walking when you're on your way somewhere and stop walking. It means just stop trying to get anywhere. And I trust that in time, our intellect will catch out or will see certain movements that are in opposition to what I'm talking about. Because even when I say, just stop, even that can be interpreted as an instruction of something you need to do, that you need to do stopping. And it's not really like that. Stopping isn't something you need to do. It's not something you can do. It's something that just happens when there is a realization that there I am through the thinking mind. The thinking mind is the part of the mind that believes it is the doer and needs to achieve anything that happens in life. Believes that it makes things happen. Eventually, the working mind, the mind that I'm speaking to and that this conditioning is hopefully equipping, will start seeing this functioning of the thinking mind that is trying to make things happen, trying to get it, then trying to stop. The thinking mind is trying to do stopping, and the thinking mind trying to do stopping is the very opposite of stopping, which is the irony. And it's one, at some moment when we see this, we realize, just stop. Stop trying to stop. Stop trying to go. And it's a sort of spontaneous happening. So I thought that we could look at life a little differently to the general outlook on life that life itself puts in place for the human beings. So over the next 3 and 6 days, we'll do that. We'll look at life differently. But for today and maybe a little bit of tomorrow, I thought we'll look at life differently to the way that I normally put forward, which is a different way of looking at life. And that is, life is not what it seems. Definitely not what we think it is. what if this whole experience, this present moment experience, which means everything that fits into the field of awareness, not some abstract field of awareness, but what you could say your field of awareness. So that's all that the present moment ever is everything that is here right now that fits into your field of awareness. The two broadest aspects of the field of awareness are the sense of sight and sound. So you could look at that as a bubble, in a sense. And so look at the visual of this present moment, and you can do this with any moment in your life, every moment in your life. The visual that exists in this moment is completely contained within your field of awareness. If it was outside of your field of awareness, it wouldn't be known. And any sound that makes up part of this present moment is also within your field of awareness. So this field of awareness is like a container. And the body is an object within that field of awareness, no different to the chair or the other person. Your own body is an object within the present moment, an object within this field of awareness. So our life, anyone's life, is essentially an experience. In each moment is an experience. So life only ever happens in the present moment, and the present moment is an experience. A visual experience, a sound experience, a smell and touch and taste experience. And then contained in that experience, there is also the sense of beingness or existence. There are thought objects and feeling objects and emotion objects, which also make up the overall experience or a part of the overall experience. So we can look at it as if you start off with a blank canvas, and then all of the different layers of experience are added onto the blank canvas. And when all of the layers are projected into the moment, we end up with this experience. The experience of being a human being in a world of 3 dimensions. An experience that includes in it the sense of time and space. An experience that includes thought objects, which we call memory of a past, and that creates the impression of time. So what we know as life is not necessarily what it seems, not necessarily what we think it is. So becoming, what does being present really mean? Because you can talk about, someone can say it's very important to be in the present moment. But how does that happen? And I would suggest that one of the ways that presence happens is when we start relating to life as a momentary experience. When we start being aware of each moment, this moment, as being an arising within consciousness. If consciousness was withdrawn from this very moment, there wouldn't be any question of experience being present. The experience would collapse with the withdrawal of awareness. So in each moment that we are aware of life, it means that there is awareness and there are these objects of experience. So to become present with the fact that it is an experience, that you can do that, you can remind yourself of that at any time. Especially if you're going for a walk along the river or in a park, and you might find yourself going off into thought about, a holiday you're planning or whatever, which that's not really such a problem. And then you might remind yourself, you might realize and become interested in the present moment as an experience. Not necessarily, I'm not talking about appreciating the flowers and the river. I'm talking about just becoming aware of life as an experience. So there's a microphone here. That's weird, isn't it? If anyone wants to ask any questions, just ask for the mic. And there's a little button halfway down. And if the green light is on, you can go. So, is anyone lost, not following what I'm talking about appreciating life as a present moment experience? Okay, I'll carry on then. So it helps for us to start being aware of this present moment experience, not from the perspective of the body. We're very used to looking at life from the perspective that the body is the subject. When we expand our view to look at life as a single arising, one single experience, whatever is in the present moment. If you're out in a field, the present moment is still contained within that field of awareness. It can appear, or there is more space in the present moment than if you're in a small room. If you're in a small room, the present moment tends to be limited to what's within the four walls, at least from a visual perspective, and then there's sound, and that's also contained within the present moment. If you're outdoors and there aren't four walls, then the present moment contains more objects in it, more space. But in principle, it's the same thing. It's a singular arising within a field of awareness. And the body is an object. The body is not separate from this singular moment experience. This can become a very tangible way of experiencing life, where what happens, meaning the river flowing, the pedestrians crossing the road, the cars moving, and most importantly, the movement of the body, is all witnessed as an automatic happening and not anyone's doing. So this becoming aware of life as a momentary experience and watching the whole thing move and change from a perspective that is outside of the body. And that happens by watching the body move just like any other object within the experience. And it's not, in this exploration, it's not the body watching the body move. So what is it that is aware of the body moving? What is it that is aware of the body speaking? And so this isn't something really to think about. This exploration isn't something that we will benefit from if we're trying to understand what's being said, but rather we just need to witness. And it doesn't require any thinking to see the tree swaying, to watch the pedestrians crossing the road, to see the bird fly across the sky. And you can do, and all of this can be seen, all of those different things can be seen simultaneously because they're all different movements within the one momentary experience. And at the same time as watching the bird fly across the horizon, you can watch the hand scratch the face or wave at someone. We're so used to observing life from a perspective of separation. The body watching everything else, everything outside of it.
Hello, Roger.
Hello, just hold it for a second and it should the green light should go on, yeah?
Okay.
Great.
Just a question. You talked about the present moment experience, and there's no denying the fact that my experience is limited in a sense that I can't experience the feelings and what other people are touching and smelling and these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, I'm limited to what I can experience through this body.
Yes, indeed. Yes. So I wouldn't, if for the sake of this exploration, you don't even need to say, just for the sake of the exploration, you don't need to relate to it as what is experienced through that body. Just whatever arises in the present moment.
Is it on? Okay. Hello. I might follow up. The question is, I'm aware of, I'm watching you and you are seeing me. So it seems to be that there are, let's say, multiple consciousnesses. Because my experience is different from those of the other people in this room.
Mm-hmm. What if I don't have consciousness?
So you're suggesting it's not your consciousness?
No, I'm suggesting you are aware of your consciousness, yes, and then you're assuming that there is a consciousness here. Whereas if you are really present with your experience, what you'd have to agree is that there is an object here speaking, an object arising within your experience.
You're referring to yourself?
Hmm?
You're referring to yourself?
To this
yes,
body.
Okay.
It is, for you, from your perspective, there is awareness of a wall and of a plant and of a chair and of a body. And contained in that experience, the body is, there is sound that seems to be coming from the body. You only know one consciousness. The one that is aware of the present moment experience. We tend to interfere with presence by projecting or assuming a lot of things. So being really present with the present moment experience means I don't know that you're not an inanimate. Well, you're not inanimate, but I don't know that you have consciousness. So we have to stick with what is in the present moment experience. I could be a very advanced robot. That's programmed to speak to you. So if I was a robot, would I have consciousness?
No.
But you have consciousness, you know that.
Yes.
But you don't know whether I have consciousness.
No.
So this means that if we start refining this is how presence comes about, where there is less and less projecting onto the experience with our beliefs, and more being with the actual experience. One of the most important things in putting forward this exploration, this exercise, is for us to become aware of our awareness. One of the things that prevents an awareness of our own awareness is the imagination of a lot of things. For example, the imagination that there is a here and a there. Because when we experience life, it creates an experience that there is a here and a there. When we're present with the present moment experience, where is the there? Other than a belief that is arising in the present moment that says, well, it's not here, it's there. So if we can let that belief fall away and just be with what is, then we find, actually, I don't know that there is a there. What I know is there is this here. And then we might start to experience life differently to the experience that we have when there are a lot of assumptions and projections onto the present moment.
But doesn't one have to be kind of careful not to fall on the other side of the horse, so that you only say that only what actually is now in my experience matters, and I don't care about anything else or anybody else because there's only this consciousness?
Yes, we do have to be careful. That's why I'm not suggesting that this is what I'm describing is the absolute truth, but rather this is an exploration into the present moment, and I'm sort of placing some parameters on the exploration because it helps us shift perspective. And once that perspective has shifted and certain things are appreciated, certain things that weren't appreciated before, then there can be a refinement from that place to something that includes more components. For example, the assumption that the other does have consciousness. But it's important in order to strip out some of the projections that are creating a particular experience of life. It's important to limit the exploration a little bit for a while. So your point is very valid, that what I'm saying isn't a holistic way of living life. But as an exploration, it makes a lot of sense to start eliminating certain beliefs that can't be confirmed, just for the exploration.
Okay, so you're saying it's not to be taken as another belief?
No, this is, as I said, this is an exploration. So, what if we start looking at life as just for an exploration? Because your point is very valid. Actually, that's why I say I'm going to today and maybe tomorrow we're going to do things a little differently to how I normally describe it. And so I'll put forward, what if life is a dream? That this present moment and any other moment is actually a dream appearance, that our whole life is a dream appearance. Is it possible for us to start relating to life in this way? So, what do I mean by it being a dream appearance? Well, because we have our own first-hand experience of what night dreams are, we can look at a night dream and then extrapolate out from that understanding and maybe start looking at the present moment experience in light of our consideration of the night dream. So, what happens when we go to sleep? This world collapses. It ceases to be the experience that we're having, and a spontaneous creation within our consciousness can sometimes arise, the night dream. And in that night dream, a whole world appears. Let's say that the night dream is a dream of being on the beach. So in an instant, an ocean appears, and a sandy beach appears with hundreds of people on it, and umbrellas, and boats, and floaty things in the water, sun shining, and there's the main character of the dream, let's say you. So let's go, Roger 45 is asleep at night, and then spontaneously in the consciousness, the night dream appears. And let's, for argument's sake, say that the main character in the night dream is Roger when he was aged younger, age 25. Just so that we can create a distinction between the dream world that has spontaneously arisen in consciousness and Roger 45, who is the dreamer of that world. Now, the consciousness of Roger 45 has identified itself with a particular object in the dream, being the body object of Roger 25, and is experiencing the dream world, the world of the beach and ocean, from the perspective of Roger 25. Now, all of that is a very elaborate experience, because really there is no object Roger 25 other than part of the singular arising of the dream world. Everything is made of dream stuff in that dream world. The sand is made of the dream. The sea is made of the dream. The sun is made of the dream. The hundreds of people are made of the dream. And the main character is made of the dream. And the dream arises in consciousness. So you could say everything is an arising in consciousness. And when you look at a night dream, you'd say, well, it's an imagination. You can have a daydream, and that is an imagination. An imagination in your consciousness. And a night dream is a spontaneous imagination in consciousness. That dream is not set, or the content of the dream is not separate from the consciousness in which it arises. In an instant, an ocean arises, and in an instant, a person from which perspective the dream is happening arises. And when I say a person, the experience of a person in the dream. So if the main character, Roger 25, walks down to the ocean and dives in, there is the sense that I, this person, being Roger 25 in the dream, which is a separate, independent entity, has dived into the ocean, which is separate from it. And there are sensations, all of which are part of the elaborate dream experience. And so we know that in dreams you can have experiences of pleasure, you can have fear. The full range of experience can spontaneously arise as a dream, which is essentially an imagination. And that dream character, Roger 25, could see a person and have a memory that says, oh, that person is someone I went to school with 20 years ago. And go up to the person and say, hey, John, how's it been? I haven't seen you for so long. And John says, 20 years, I think. And the fact is that Roger 25 didn't exist before the dream came into existence. So where is this question of 20 years ago? 20 years ago is contained in the dream because the content of what we call memory was included as part of the content of the dream. And so Roger 25 will have the experience that he has been around for much longer than he actually has. He just appeared. But he believes, based on the content of the dream, that he got married 5 years ago and has 2 kids and whatever else the dream experience puts into place. And we all know that when a dream is happening, it feels very real. Imagine if we're just an appearance in consciousness. Yes. And yet we don't relate to life. We don't relate to ourselves. We don't relate to the other as that, when in fact we might be able to find a perspective that sees it like that. And if we find a perspective, meaning if the dream provides a perspective, if the dream is designed in such a way that it unfolds so that we have a new perspective that sees it as an arising in consciousness, sees the present moment as exactly that, an image arising within consciousness. If that happens, it's fair to say that our relationship to life might change. it can be quite fun to look at the others and look at them as just appearances in a dream experience. And that means the other is functioning exactly according to the dream. And we might also see ourselves as that too. A part of this present moment, functioning exactly the way that the dream is designing us to function.
So I have no issue with present moment and what is. But I am realizing more and more that there is this absolutely imperfect body-mind that is arising in this what is, and is functioning according to life story or whatever it is. However, I have a question about others in this dream.
About others?
Others, yes. So, I don't know if you went through the similar process with the relatives, for instance, relatives or close relatives, when you were deepening and progressing more and more, the dense, I don't know, maybe the words will be wrong, but it doesn't matter, I just want to describe, the dense consciousness of others starts really like to hit you on the head. Like you feel, I feel it really sometimes energetically in all parts of my body. And sometimes it's what is, yes, for sure it's what is, but also sometimes I see like irritation is arising. Sometimes there is no irritation, but I really, really feel this density in consciousness of others. And this others for me, even though I see, for instance, sometimes I laugh because I see my close relatives, they are robots.
They are?
Robots.
Robots, yeah.
Robots functioning to whatever conditioning they are functioning, but still this sensitivity increased quite a lot. So some comments from you.
Yes, that can become that is a phenomena that many people talk about, and that would mean it's a phenomena of the dream. So the irritability or the feeling, what you're describing as the denseness of another's belief systems, let's say, can be felt, but it's really impersonal. If we look at everything that is arising in this moment as a creation, that is not your doing or the other's doing, but what is here. So what is doesn't, when I'm saying, well, it this is the dream creation, that doesn't mean that we have to be at peace with it. What is can include, blame, guilt, pride, worry, expectation, frustration, which fits into some of those categories. And if we can see that as simply part of the arising, then there's less involvement in it. Which doesn't mean that the primary involvement, the frustration, won't be there, but there'll be the frustration will be seen. So in this exploration, you'll find that what I will point at is the simple description of what is. So you might say that there is the arising of frustration. And it's part of the present moment experience. So it isn't so much about fixing it, but rather creating for a shift to happen where whatever is arising in the present moment, including the stubbing of your toe on a chair, when it happens, it's that is the content in the present moment. The pain going up your toe, and the moment before it was the foot going through the air and hitting the chair. And so whatever happens is seen as content of an experience, content of a creation. I'm been putting it in the framework of it being a dream, because talking about a dream can be very easy for us to see that a dream is a creation in consciousness, and the character isn't the one that creates it. The character comes into existence because the character has been created as part of the singular dream experience. So the fact that there are 100 people on the beach and chairs and millions of grains of sand and can be experienced as many doesn't change the fact that it's actually a single spontaneous arising in the present moment. So it is an experience of duality, an experience of many on from within the experience, and yet you might be able to see how fundamentally it's actually all one single experience. A single experience designed to be experienced from within the experience as an experience of many. And as we start to become aware of this experience, and maybe as we take a broader perspective on this experience, the separation starts to fall away, and we can start to see the many people as being like many people in a photograph, where actually there is just a single photograph, one non-duality, the single photograph. And yet if you look into the photograph, you can see the many. But the many don't mean that it isn't just one. So the experience is an experience designed to be an experience of duality, and yet fundamentally it is a non-dual creation, meaning all of the many arise simultaneously and are really not separate from each other. Can we start to see the present moment like that? It requires us to just see rather than think. You might find minutes of silence. Silence meaning that the experience in that moment is an experience that doesn't include the thinking mind that is so often included in the experience. And why doesn't it include the thinking mind? Because the experience is maybe in that moment witnessing the experience as a ever-changing singular experience, rather than focusing on one object and seeing it in contrast to another object and then judging it and saying that it shouldn't be this way or it should be that way. Now there's just an interest in what is as an appearance. So witnessing what is as an appearance. So the question of it should be different doesn't really make so much sense when we understand it's a creation created not by me. And even when I'm saying me, when we're witnessing, we know ourselves as something much more impersonal than the body. Just the silent witnessing awareness. And most seeking happens because our life experience is uncomfortable. And often if someone asks a spiritual teacher, when is life acceptable? When does life feel content? And the answer that will be given is when there is presence with the present moment, or when the thinking mind is quiet, when thoughts of suffering don't arise. So these are all different ways of saying the same thing. And then there can be a frustration. It's like, well, how do I do that? I can't seem to make that happen. And the reason is because the brain is wired a certain way and is functioning in a particular way. And that way is always creating this mental activity. And so we can hear that there will be a sense of contentment in life when the thinking mind stops. But there simply isn't a capacity for that to happen. And so there can be frustration in spiritual seeking. And in my experience, starting to see life as a creation is a very effective way of bringing about a shift in the brain that is necessary if there is going to be more silence. What I'm saying is, if we continue to see life from the perspective that we have been seeing it from, and if from that perspective there is this incessant thinking, if we continue to see it through that lens, then the thinking is probably going to remain. So if we can start to see life differently, then there's a chance for that thinking to get interrupted. So when a thought arises, when a feeling arises, witness it as part of the present moment creation. Not something that you are doing, not something that you are creating, but rather part of the creation that has spontaneously arisen in this moment. And what you are is the witnessing awareness. All of the involvement in that exists as a component of the creation, the involvement meaning the anxiety, the blame, the guilt, the uncomfortableness, is all there because life is taken personally. Life is related to from perspective of me and the other and life. And I see myself as the one that is going to make things happen the way that is positive, and when it doesn't turn out that way, then I say, well, I was the one that stuffed it up. Or I see the other as the one that has got in the way of my life turning out positively. So if life is seen from that perspective, there's a lot of mental resistance, and that mental resistance manifests as an uncomfortableness, and that mental resistance and uncomfortableness covers up a connection to the aspect of ourself that is precious. The aspect of ourself that is key to a peaceful and content life experience. So the sound of the birds is just one component of the present moment experience. My voice is one small component of the present moment experience. And we don't need to think about it, we don't need to judge it. We just need to be aware of it. And it takes no effort to hear the chirping of the bird. In fact, you try not hearing the chirping of the bird. And at the base of this present moment experience, there is a very important characteristic. You could say it's the backbone of the whole present moment experience. And that is the sense of existence. Now, this sense of existence is so consistently present in life experience, has always been consistently present in life experience, that it has sort of become like part of the furniture. So much so that we don't even know it exists often until awareness lands on it. And then we realize, oh, this has always been here, and it's pretty important. And that then becomes what we can know as our home, our place to return to when in the present moment, when being present with the moment, we find that this, the birds chirping are not always there. A certain person is not always there. A certain landscape is not always there. But the sense of existence is always here. Whether you're in a little box, 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter, and that is the experience of you huddled up in a little box with not much light and funny smells. The sense of existence is still intrinsic to that experience. And if you're out in a field with amazing views, the sense of existence is present. And given we're exploring the present moment, if you close your eyes, actually what we call closing your eyes, you'll notice that from one moment to the next, the present moment experience has changed radically. Now, remember what I had said at the beginning of the talk is that we're so used to overlaying what we think life is. And so often when we close our eyes, we have this thought running that, oh, well, the world is just on the other side of my eyelids, and I've just got my eyes closed. So we remain not present with the present moment experience when we have our eyes closed. So if you've got your eyes closed, or what we call your eyes closed, because when you have your eyes closed, you don't know that you have eyes that are closed, unless you believe you do. So because this exploration is about being present with the present moment experience, it's worth becoming present with what's there when what we call having our eyes closed is happening. And you'll realize there is no room, there are no people. There's just a vast empty space. And when certain sounds arise, our brain will say, oh, well, that was a car that exists on the other side of my eyelids. And so then we're not really present with the present moment experience, because if we're present with the present moment experience, we go, well, there is no car and there is no world as we ordinarily know it. There is just this vast emptiness and a sound arising in that vast emptiness. And the sound arises and it subsides back into the emptiness. And if I say that that sound is the sound of a bird, I'm distorting the present moment experience with thought. Thought that is superimposing an idea onto what actually is in our experience. And then if you open your eyes, once again, what we call opening our eyes, because that may not be what's actually happening, the present moment experience in an instant changes radically. Look what's here again. You can close your eyes and it's all gone. And then open them and there it is. Now, if we just keep insisting that, well, there's this world and I just closed my eyes so I can't see it. And then I open my eyes and look, there it is. It was always here. If we keep insisting on that view of life, fair enough. But it might actually get in the way of silence. So what does it mean? It means when we close our eyes, the whole world has instantaneously collapsed and has been replaced by what is here in this moment. And if you're present, there is no body, there are no other people, no birds, some sounds. There's no Roger, but there's a sound of voice. Now you're starting to appreciate what experience is. Remember, a dream at night spontaneously arises, a whole ocean spontaneously arises. And it spontaneously collapses when the dream spontaneously finishes. So mystics have been saying that we need to die to each moment. Yeah, okay. Die to each moment. Which really can mean seeing that each moment dies and is reborn, and dies and is reborn. And what we experience as a continuity may well be not at all a continuity, other than a continuity in appearance.
Yes, that experiment what we did about, and then when you also don't, I saw when you listening the birds, when you don't have idea about the birds, you heard different sounds because it's not narrowing on the it's a bird, but it's more like discovering something different starts to happen in the awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Also, when I open the eyes and look, it's a camera, which I don't label it camera. You start to see a different shapes. It's more like become more aware of every different subtle things which I wasn't aware before.
Mm-hmm.
Because the label or idea of something, you just give you direct experience, but you are not exploring anymore.
Very true.
Yeah.
So everything becomes fresher.
Fresher, exactly. It's like
and
every moment.
It's almost like it's new.
Also as a person, if I don't, it's a Roger, it's a fresh moment to see you again. It's it's like that, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
So as you're walking through the street, you might find yourself witnessing the other people coming towards you. You will witness the street signs coming closer and then going past. And life becomes interesting even if you happen to be in a grey, dull city. Because you're now not looking for a particular pleasurable experience, but you're rather marveling at the awesomeness of experience itself, rather than pleasurable experience versus painful experience. We're now seeing any experience as experience, and maybe quite mystical. Where does it all come from? So don't worry if you're wondering where the doership and attachment to outcomes and daily living explanation has gone. We'll get to that. And maybe you'll see that within the context of this framework, some nuances will take place, but most importantly, it's an opportunity to just find yourself being. Because this witnessing of life as a spontaneous arising in the moment is what being is. It's very hard to find ourselves in being if there hasn't been a shift out of involvement in the experience. You'll find that as life tends to develop us, where we feel like we are the subject, observing the rest of the world and doing everything that is happening, that we are so involved in what we are doing and how we are doing it and whether the outcome is good, that the perspective of witnessing gets completely corrupted. And if that witnessing, if that distancing, if that non-judgment hasn't kicked in, if a practice, and this can be an effortless practice, just whenever you remember to just witness the present moment as an arising in your consciousness. Not your consciousness as the body, but the consciousness that is aware of the present moment experience. Each time that happens, there is a shifting out of involvement in what is happening to a position of witnessing what is happening. Witness thoughts arising, witness emotions arising, witness actions happening, witness speaking happening, all as a spontaneous part of the singular momentary experience. Not watching me as a separate independent entity talking, but rather witnessing talking happening. Witness walking happening. There's no one talking. There's no one walking. There is just walking happening. And the subject is that which is witnessing life happening. You are the subject. You are not the object.
I have two questions. Well, it looks like, I don't know, that even if the shift has happened, there is still time is needed that this full acceptance is coming more and more and more into life, and all the attachments to outcomes and the results is dropped away. So this is what I am observing also, how it's going on. And this acceptance, so I was very much wondering, not recently, but previously, how this acceptance will look like. Now I have quite clear understanding what is acceptance. And the question is that some teachers say that judgments should stop arising fully. So what would you say about that? Because even though I see acceptance really like kicking strongly in, I also see judgments are still going on. Sometimes, not always, but they are still arising.
So this idea of should, judgments should stop arising, what they mean is that at some point judgments will stop arising. But I don't suspect that they are saying that you can make the judgments stop, because hopefully a teacher is seeing that judgment is simply a component of the experience, and the experience is what it is. And so there is an explanation that the dream includes judgment. Why does the dream include judgment? Because the dream still includes certain belief systems in place. And when those belief systems are in place, because it's a dream of causality, even though fundamentally it's all a spontaneous arising, the spontaneous creation is designed to follow rules of causality. And so if the dream includes certain beliefs, then the judgment has to still arise. The shift now can allow those judgments to be witnessed as a happening, and with this explanation, you will also possibly be able to witness them as a happening because there is an understanding that certain beliefs are still in place. And you say, well, life put the beliefs in place. So life will get rid of the beliefs when it's ready. I can't insist that I want the beliefs to be gone now, because that's just going to be more suffering. A resistance to the fact that the beliefs are there. And it's an unrealistic request, because it's sort of like, I've used the example of an avalanche coming down the mountain, and we're watching it and saying, can you move a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left? And that's just an unrealistic request of the avalanche. It's not going to, it doesn't function that way. It's going to go as it's going to go. So with this understanding, then the judgments will keep arising. That's our experience. We see it. It's good to know why it keeps arising, and the answer is that even when certain shifts happen and certain recognitions, for example, the recognition that I am not the doer and that my happiness isn't to be found in outcomes, and where we see that very deeply. Seeing it very deeply doesn't mean that it has the power to instantaneously undo the deeply ingrained habits. But what we can see is that in order for the deeply ingrained habits to get undone, first we need to see past the assumptions that are taken to be truth, that are at the base of those habits. And then in time, because we've seen through the beliefs that we had, and we see that they're not realistic beliefs in relation to how life actually is, in time, the habit gets worn away. And that's when, in time, the judgment will stop arising altogether. Now that we're talking about judgment, it's also important to create a distinction between judgment and discernment. Because when our attachment to outcome and our belief in personal doership falls away, we don't lose the faculty of discernment. And so that means that if someone is driving their car at 100 kilometers an hour in a 30-kilometer school zone, your discernment will say, that is irresponsible and that is dangerous. If attachment to outcome and belief in personal doership was there, that discernment will instantaneously be turned into judgment, which is a feeling of hatred towards the person, a feeling that fundamentally shouldn't be happening. Whereas when there is discernment, we would say, relative to the benchmark of safety, that shouldn't be happening, right? So we could call the police and say, look, there's someone driving up and down the street at 100 kilometers an hour and something needs to be done about it. That doesn't imply attachment to outcome. That doesn't imply belief in personal doership. That could just be a biological movement relative to a certain happening that you have identified as being dangerous. And the old habit of seeing that as inappropriate relative to all of life has fallen away. So now with this discernment, we can see that it's dangerous. We can see that it's inappropriate relative to a benchmark of safety, but still hold it as being completely valid within the bigger picture of life. Because the bigger picture of life, or life in general, is duality, pleasure and pain, good and bad, kindness and evil, safe driving, dangerous driving. So if we understand that life is the full range of outcomes, then we can see the fast driving, and one aspect of us will say it is destined for that person to be driving fast, and if an accident happens, it was destined for the accident to happen. And so there's an acceptance. But that acceptance doesn't mean that you sit there Zen-like watching the car go up and down.
Yeah, I think this is very important comment from you about this discernment, because the safety car, it's quite straightforward explanation, but we also sometimes experience when people are dishonest or arrogant, and of course, I meant these types of judgments. It's not that you shouldn't be arrogant or you shouldn't be dishonest, but sometimes there is a desire to say something
Sure.
or to do certain action. That was mainly what I had in mind.
Yeah, so that may well not be what I would call judgment, but more a biological reaction to a circumstance. So if someone pushes you, the biological reaction might be to push back. And then once the pushing of yourself and the pushing back has happened, you, or simultaneously to it, you see that that was your destiny to be pushed, and then your destiny to biologically push back, and his destiny to be pushed. It then might be your destiny to get punched in the nose and go to prison or whatever, you know. And if you can see all of that, including your biological reactions and your psychological reactions, if a reaction includes not only a biological reaction of pushing back, but a feeling of hatred, if you can see all of that as destiny, in the next moment, you're free of it. It's happened. And the story about, you know, can you believe he pushed me? He shouldn't have pushed me. I hate him for pushing me. Now look what's happened. We're both in prison. I have a broken nose. All of that story is finished because we see that whatever happens in each moment is destiny unfolding, part of the dream creation. And so if we go back to the night dream, the main character is doing whatever the dream makes him do. If he has fantastic morals and great behavior, it's because that is how the dream has designed his destiny. And if someone else has different standards and they steal and they're dishonest to him, then depending on the understanding of what life is or what the dream is, then he can accept that it's destiny, it's the dream creation for that person to have, you know, unethical standards. It was destiny for them to have stolen my wallet. And in the same way, you might see that you have your own shortcomings. So we're not perfect. And the attitude of peace is to relate to our shortcomings as destiny, which doesn't mean use that as an excuse to perpetuate shortcomings that are really just a hidden way of you trying to get what the ego belief that says it wants more, trying to get more. But rather, when it happens, then in hindsight, you might as well look at it as a happening rather than feeling guilty about it. Because feeling guilty is just more of your own uncomfortableness. Accepting it as a happening doesn't mean you don't acknowledge it as being a shortcoming and you say, actually, that really isn't great behavior. I acknowledge it, but I was designed in that moment to function that way. Maybe my recognition of it as not being great behavior will mean that tomorrow I will function differently, or in the next minute I will function better. But if in the next minute you function that way again, tomorrow you function that way again, the understanding is life has designed me to, in this moment, function that way. So someone else will say, oh, that's very convenient for someone to say that. But what if it's true? What if that's how life works? I think it is.
Is there a button? So I have two questions. The first one is there consciousness over there? Like, are you conscious, or what are you?
I don't know that you are, but I know that I am.
That makes sense somehow inside. Okay, and then the other question is, do you still experience conflict in relationships? Or is it the end of...
Conflict biologically in the moment, yes. For example, if I would like something done a certain way and I make it clear that I would like this done a certain way, and it's not done that way time and time again, then when I see it's not done that way, the reaction inside is not one of, woohoo, it hasn't been done the way I like it. How wonderful. Biologically, it can be, damn it, how many times do I have to say? And simultaneously to that biological reaction, there is an understanding that it is destiny for it to have been done that way, and destiny for the biological reaction to be displeased with it. And because of that, the biological reaction, which you could call conflict, doesn't penetrate to a depth of feeling where it creates an uncomfortableness so it creates pain on the level of circumstance, and that pain is temporary and gotten over very quickly. And at no point does it penetrate down to a level of uncomfortableness with oneself or the other. So someone might see it and go, what do you mean you've told the other that they haven't done this well enough? Isn't that an uncomfortableness with oneself and the other? And my answer would go, I can understand why it might look that way, but what is actually happening is someone is projecting onto what they see, probably go to their own experience of how they feel when they're getting angry at someone, which may well include an uncomfortableness, and then say, well, getting angry with someone else is an uncomfortableness with them. Whereas my experience is, no, you can get angry with someone, not feel uncomfortable on the level of self, and then find that anger falls away very quickly, so much so that you even, you wish a person that has delivered pain to you, pain that you got angry about, and you have no ill will towards them.
Yeah, I think I've started to experience that sometimes in the last few months, and it's just what's happening. But then other people's perception, I still worry, like, oh, that must have looked bad, or whatever, I did it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's no sense of resistance in the body then in the midst of it. It's just like you don't experience that tension if someone's upset with you or yelling at you or something.
If someone's yelling at me, then that is pain in the moment. So once again, I don't go, woohoo, someone's yelling at me, how nice. Still, on the preference level, I would much prefer someone is being pleasant. And yet, the interpretation that someone delivering pain to me is an attack on who I am isn't there. So then someone can yell and it can be unpleasant, but the guilt and the doubting oneself doesn't kick in.
Thank you.
Good. Well, I think we can call it a day, because today is going to be a shorter satsang, and then we'll have slightly longer ones through the rest of the week.